All right, let's get into it. So today's topic is Splunk MCP and Agentic AI, machine data without limits. So there's a good chance if you've attended any of our events over the last maybe year and a half or so here, you've probably heard us talk about MCP during some of these. Or there's also a good chance you've had an opportunity to try out MCP for yourself. For those of you that haven't, MCP will go into its GA state here on the 4th of February. So if you haven't had a chance to try out MCP yet, you're about to get a great opportunity to do so. So as we're going over everything today, please note that we're going to be looking at a couple of future ideas and concepts. We hope to obviously get all of these things out in the times we're discussing here, but as is often the case with AI and a lot of other things in the tech world, things can shift and timelines can adjust a little bit. So just please bear with us if something may say like it's coming in Q3. We're aiming for that, but timelines can shift a little bit. So a quick overview of everyone today. My name is Cody Sugg, and I'm the product marketing manager for Splunk AI, alongside a few of my other cohorts over on the AI side. I am responsible for a lot of the marketing materials that we have around Splunk AI Assistant and Splunk MCP Server. And Raphael, if you want to do a quick intro for yourself and Johans.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. I'm Rafael Botbol-Weiss. I'm a tech evangelist at Cisco Experience Center, and basically taking Splunk, making sure the data gets to our right executives and they can do more with that data.
Thanks, Rafael. So I'll throw in here. Hey, everyone. My name is Johans Acosta. I'm part of the Global Platform Specialist team. I've been working in AI for around 5 years, and coming out of college, I always knew I liked numbers and systems, never knew a career in AI was expected for me, and I'm sure everyone kind of feels the same way. AI is definitely taking over the industry. It's certainly taking over my life, but I'm really happy to share with these colleagues today some of the cool capabilities that are coming out of Splunk around AI and give some real-life demos. So I'll hand it back to Cody for that.
Thank you, Raphael, and thank you, Johans, for the introduction. So I brought this up a second ago, but we also wanted to kind of just gauge our audience for today. For those of you that have used Splunk MCP Server, please let us know. And if you haven't, also just let us know here to take this poll. Just kind of want to see where our audience is at in terms of familiarity with the feature set overall. Quick reminder also for those of you that may be experiencing any video issues, please try some of the tips that I mentioned earlier on. You may have to swap between browsers or potentially do some cache clearing to solve some issues there. All right, we're getting pretty good survey rates. Looks like about 40% of you right now. Give it another second or two here. Alrighty, so let's see what we've got. So a lot of you are new to Splunk MCP Server since you haven't had a chance to use it. Seems like there is a portion of you here that have had the opportunity to get your hands on MCP Server and try it out. And a few of you seem like you also had the opportunity to try other MCP servers. So hopefully today will be a good educational experience for those of you that haven't had the opportunity to use MCP Server yet. And additionally, hoping that those of you that have will learn a few additional tips and tricks that you can use to improve that experience a little further. So one other question we also wanted to ask, because Agentic AI is going to be another big element in today's presentation, we also wanted to kind of gauge to see how you're using Agentic AI currently. Are you using anything that maybe your company has developed in-house? Any third-party options? Maybe you haven't invested in Agentic AI at all yet, or any kind of agentic systems yet. Or maybe you're just in the learning phase. You want to know more overall. Give folks a little bit longer to get their answers in here. See some of you also sharing some of your responses in chat, so we appreciate that info there too. All right, let's take a look at what our audience breakdown for agentic systems looks like right now. Okay, so pretty interesting split across the board. Looks like about a quarter of you have been using some in-house agentic AI and agentic systems. A few of you using third-party. Some folks are currently not using anything at all, and it looks like, again, the majority are still in the learning process, which also understandable. We've got a lot of folks right now that are learning more about agentic AI and like where its place in the industry ends up being right now. So hopefully we can kind of help with giving you a bit more info about where we stand on that. So for today's discussion, we're going to start things off by looking at a little thing we call the AI tool island problem. And then from there, we'll talk a little bit more about what MCP is as a protocol. And then I'll turn things over to Rafael to talk a bit more about Splunk MCP server specifically. And then he and Johannes will do some product and use case demonstrations of Splunk MCP server. And then finally, we'll sort of wrap things up with a look at what's coming next, and then a little Q&A session at the end, along with some additional resources that you can check out after this presentation. So to kick things off, as Johannes mentioned earlier on, we've reached that point now where AI in some way, shape, or form is a pretty major constant in all of our lives, be that at work, be it in our just day-to-day. In some way, shape, or form, you're probably using AI. And in a lot of ways, that's been super helpful. We've seen a lot of folks take advantage of different AI assistants, things like co-pilots, and these have all been great for doing research and pulling information together. But like so many other new technologies, you sometimes run into the issue of these things operating within their own silos. So while they can be great on their own, the ability to have them communicate between one another or to be able to fetch information across these different sort of tools can be a little tricky and cause some potential blockages. However, this is where MCP comes in to kind of help solve this issue. So for those not familiar, MCP is short for Model Context Protocol, and a great way to look at this is that it's an open protocol that helps to enable a more seamless integration between LLMs and different applications that will need these external data sources and tools. A great comparison, as you can see in the image here, is think of MCP as sort of a similar concept to a USB. So everyone, no matter what piece of technology you use, you're familiar with how a USB works. It's going to be something you plug in to be able to connect one thing to another, no matter what sort of type that is, be it USB 2.0, 3.0, USB Type-C. All of that allows for that effective means of communication between different devices and the ability to transfer all of the data you need between different points. So in a lot of ways, MCP kind of acts as that sort of MCP sort of acts as that universal USB approach to the way we're connecting LLMs and agentic agents for everything. So rather than having to go about building a lot of your own custom scripts for any of this, MCP as a protocol makes it very easy to just build everything off of this same sort of universal language. To give you an idea of sort of how this works, the overall agent architecture is designed as a sort of improvement over the idea of just having pipelines and change, and it kind of helps manage things in a cyclical graph sort of nature. Doesn't use that same sort of logic that you might see in something like a router where you have things with more defined edges. Each of these sort of graphs are made up of a series of nodes and conditional edges, and all of that sort of data comes across each of these various conditional edges, and the logic lives along those key points, rather than it being sort of the more traditional feedback loop you might see again in a structure like a router. So as we also talked about earlier, we sort of seen the evolution of how agentic AI has started playing a role here. Early on, it was all of us using things like various AI assistants. And these are great because they were designed to follow just sort of key sets of instructions and automate repetitive tasks. But ultimately, a lot of this was set in a way that was meant to be reactive. So the next step for that, obviously, is to create something that's more proactive. And that's where the notion of agentic workflow started to come in. So these achieve that sort of singular goal, allow you to address a broader range of tasks, and automate workflows more seamlessly and efficiently. And then the next logical evolution from there would be going in a fully autonomous multi-agent system and sort of creating an internet of agents, as it were, to mimic some of that key human logic and reasoning and help improve upon some of the things that we can do for basically routing out some of the more basic tasks or things that would take large quantities of time to make it so much easier for the actual human elements of your organizations to be able to do the things that matter most for them, and where like that human element is a lot more needed. So why this matters? So looking at things from a market standpoint, we've already seen where agentic AI has had a huge surge in the last couple of years, and Gartner and IDC, among other groups, are estimating that we'll see something along the lines of 196 billion in terms of that market by 2030. And we're already starting to see, according to IDC, over 80% of organizations investing in agentic AI, with Gartner themselves also predicting that the previously mentioned Internet of Agents will be a sort of core element in AI ecosystems by 2027. So to help facilitate all of this, again, MCP sort of becomes that de facto standard for AI interoperability. It's already been adopted by a number of these different groups: Anthropic, OpenAI, Hugging Face. All of them have sort of adopting this as the base model. And it's also what we're using here at Splunk as one of the core foundational models for how we're helping our users be able to have all of their agentic workflows and structures come together in a more unified way. And to talk a little bit more about that, I'm now going to turn things over to Raphael to tell you a little bit more about Splunk MCP Server.
Thank you, Cody. So as Cody explained, AI is here to stay and push the industry into new limits. So either you are thinking of using like AI as an assistant or even developing an agentic app, we believe that your AI will be more powerful if we give it more data to look at. So it can only be as good as your data. If we will have an AI agent, smart as it can be, GPT 5.2, and we'll ask it about our business, it doesn't have access to our business data, it can answer us. That's one use case you can think of. So here comes the Splunk MCP server, which basically enables your AI to access Splunk data, and it can be one platform, many platforms, can be cloud, on-prem. But what you need to think about is like it helps across the board, meaning like you can be an engineer and you can ask something like, get the indexes, tell me about the health of the environment, run this SPL query for me, like very detailed on that. Or you can be an executive working with an AI assistant. For example, we have something in Cisco that is shared for the employees, and I can actually ask it questions and get answers about my Cisco store environment, which we'll show later on in the demo. So across the board, another important thing is that security is built into that. So one of the things with AI is we always talk about being responsible and make sure that you control the data. It follows the same RBAC role-based access control of Splunk. So you create a user for your MCP, and then there is a role. You create a token for that, and then you expose that token to the AI MCP client that you will use. I'll talk about it in a sec. And the most important thing, it's really 3 to 5 minute installation. It's basically just another Splunk app that you install in your Splunk platform. So I threw a lot of buzzword there, so let's break it down a little bit. On a high level, think of MCP as something that enhances your agentic apps and basically expose tools, capabilities, for them to use in order to enrich their abilities. So you will probably have an AI assistant. One of the capabilities that you'll have is an MCP client. In my demo, you will see I'm using an application called LM Studio, which is my agent, and it has an MCP client that I can configure to access MCP servers. The MCP server is usually what will be on the vendor side. I'm saying usually because nothing stops you from building one yourself. And the MCP server basically exposes to the MCP client what are the tools that it can use. Okay, get indexes, for example, is a Splunk MCP capability that your MCP client know about, and then can tell the AI, hey, I can actually get the indexes through this MCP server. And the MCP server expose those tools. Think of those tools as functions that basically define sets of APIs to be used in order to achieve that capability. So if we will use the get indexes tool, that means behind the scene, there are a set of APIs running from the MCP server to the Splunk APIs to get that data being fetched by the MCP server and then transmit to the MCP client to be processed by your AI agent. Hope that makes some sense. And if not, don't worry. We will show that in a demo. And this is a diagram that can actually show you the flow. So if I am a user and I have some kind of an agentic system or a client that I have, the client can connect to many MCP servers. One of them can be Splunk MCP. And then the Splunk MCP server will expose those tools. Behind those tools, there are the API gateways. So you can see how it basically follows the security elements that we have, but make it simpler for your agentic app to know, discover, and use those capabilities. So we talked a little bit. Here is a high-level architecture of that, and we can drill down later if needed. But where is the MCP inside my Splunk platform? So if we have Splunk D, which runs the web, the REST API, everything that we need, and we have these Splunk apps, so we have ITSI, and we have the security, and we also have an MCP server that you can download from Splunk base, sorry, or if you're using cloud, it comes inherited into your environment. This will require you to configure a token for it, so a user role token, and then you can actually expose that to the MCP client, usually through the port 8089. And that means the client can interact with that, and the admin and the user can still go to the Splunk web to do some administration work or use the REST API as they did before. So hopefully this demystified that a little bit. And again, it's really 3 minutes installation. It's really, really fun. Some of the tools that we exposed today, the basic one, run a Splunk query, which is just like, hey, this is the query I need. Just run it. Really good if you have your assistant with you or you're creating your own macros or something like that, and you're very specific about that, you can do that. Discover, so learn about an environment. Let's say you have you got access and you have an AI assistant. You can like, hey, tell me about this, the indexes, tell me about data there, break it down based on like a limit of their database and those kind of things. So you can get that user information. And of course, everything I'm saying here depends on what is the role and permissions you gave that MCP user. Some cool things that I want you to see is like the AI that we implemented into Splunk is generate SPL, which you probably know from Splunk AI Assistant. You can actually ask it and then get the SPL, which we know can definitely increase people that are new to Splunk, and optimize SPL, which means that you can have your through your AI agent, take a Splunk query and then actually optimize that and get a better one with that. So a couple of things to know about what we exposed through the MCP. And with that, into a demo, I will say that demoing with AI, tell me that you can see my screen, Cody?
Showing up for me.
Awesome. So what you see here is super simple. A lot of people think AI, you need to like big GPUs, a lot of memory. That's it. You can have your macOS download LM Studio or any type of AI client that you want and load the models that you download from the open source. In my case, I'm using GPT OSS 20 billion, and this is theoretically unaware of the internet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it about California, and that will be the equivalent of going to a very, very smart person and asking it about California. Probably the knowledge is known to like a certain point in time. Maybe there is more in the population, but it's a good reasoning for that. If I wanted to like get something about like, let's say something that is relevant now. So what is the current Cisco stock price, right? So in that case, the LLM itself was not trained on today's, and it's probably not know that, so hallucinations, or we can see something like, hey, I know it by June 24th, but I don't know about it today. So we get that. Now let's enhance my specific agent that is running with my MCP from my Cisco store. So my environment of Splunk, my environment of the AI is connected to the store right now. And you can see all the capabilities that I'm able to run now. So I can ask something simple as, let's do, tell me about today's store purchases. Right? And what happened right now, and it takes some time because of my laptop, but everything is running locally here. Give just a sec. And by the way, I think personally the biggest hard thing to do when AI is demoing it, because you never know what you're gonna get. Here is a good example for that. Like my assistant is really, really thinking about this query. Here we go. Get that. So what to kind of generate the SPL for that, thinking about it, and then to run the Splunk query. One of the things that you can see directly from here, because we're working on developer mode, is I can actually see the Splunk query that it ran, and I can see the results of that. So that's very important if I want to debug something or kind of validate that what I got is actually true. And voila, we have the current number of purchases from the Splunk store, from the Cisco store today. Another thing that we can do is that, okay, that is great. That is one Splunk environment. Let's say it's in one data center, one of the business units that are using. I can actually connect it to another one, which in my role, I have a McLaren F1 experience here in our Cisco Experience Center. So I can connect it to another MCP server of Splunk and ask something like, tell me about this week racing and lap results. And now, hopefully, my AI client will understand that, oh, I'm talking about racing. And now I'm going to go to my F1 MCP server, get the data, and present it here. Which you can see how powerful this can be. And again, this is all running on my laptop. So you can start doing that tomorrow if you want. You just think about the implementation that you can have if you have multiple environments and you need to query or you need to kind of understand or debug something. Even if you have 3 Splunk environments, you can actually do those things from your laptop, right? So it takes a while. It's thinking a little bit about that. You can see some of Oscar Piastri here. You've got the whole data, and now the table. Here we go. Ooh, that's a lot of data, a lot of racing this week. We'll give it one more second. If not, I'll go to my backup plan. Here we go. So you can see here the data from our racing environment. Now I want to take it one step further. And this is where AI comes really, really cool, is that this model is a generic model and it wasn't trained on racing data, but because it has access to Splunk and know what good looks like, I can actually ask it to suggest improvements for each player. And what it will actually do, it will look at the data that it got from here and go and search for what good looks like based on other racing that we have. And usually what happens is that it will compare it to the best driver here. And for every other racer here, it will suggest improvements and how this driver can actually do. So to conclude, while this is running, one, simple to start, can do that tomorrow. Security built into that, and installation is something between 3 to 5 minutes. So I will advise everybody to just go take your development environment of Splunk, do it there, and have fun. And with that, I'm going to transfer the floor to Johan to talk to you about other MCP demos.
Thanks, Raphael. So we're going to start off with a little video presentation here. Should kick off. You just hit next. Yeah, so in this demo video, this is an example illustrating what you could accomplish connecting multiple MCP servers. So I'm an SRE agent. I'm giving my AI or LM a prompt to look through the stock savvy application. There was an alert about a DB connection error. So now I'm looking through Confluence, which is an Atlassian service, to see if there's any runbooks to fix it. And I'm really allowing the LLM to perform more of the reasoning and define a workflow to look through a runbook. And then if there's any SPL queries related to that runbook, the LLM or the agent in this case is able to actually enact upon that. So it's leveraging multiple tools from the MCP environment, and that's really what MCP enables, right? This collaborative approach, and this is an example of one agentic design pattern where we're allowing it to collaborate. So before, these would be siloed services or systems. I would have to move between different context windows to get that information. But really here, what I'm able to do is allow the LLM to go through all that information. And then here I can see the specific queries that are being enacted. It's giving me some of the results back. And this example I built like through a React application. So this is just an example interface. This isn't like related to any Splunk technology architecture other than I'm relying on Splunk MCP server and Atlassian MCP server. So this is a quick demo going through, and I can see that each of these function callings, they're dynamically called too. So I'm not programmatically writing out the commands. I'm allowing the LLM to determine from the list of available tools within the MCP environment how I should go through this process. And what's interesting about this is that it's really non-deterministic, meaning that kind of going back to Raphael's point, the LLM can build out a workflow or work stream in a multitude of steps, and it might change. So if I enable an agent and I don't really give it any structure, in that example, right, it went through, ran a couple Splunk queries. Well, maybe I only want to limit it to 2 or 3. So then I would have to add in those limits or restrictions. So when we're building out agentic systems, it's important to understand that these are systems. I think there's this buzzword going around saying the word AI agents. And if you've worked in like cloud or infrastructure, you think of like Kafka agents, right? Like these listeners that stream in a certain environment. But agentic systems, really the key term or the coin term here is agency. So what you're looking at is that there's this agent control flow of AI agents. They could either be very restrictive and just basically route between a predetermined flow, so deterministic, or they could be fully autonomous, like the example we gave. We just connected 2 MCP servers, we just gave it a prompt, and we said, go at it. Why that could be an issue, obviously, is if we care about cost. So if we let an LLM just go at it and run a bunch of Splunk queries without enacting any workflows or restrictions or limits, then we're really not doing a good job of building out an agentic system. So it's a really cool capability, but is it realistic? It needs more fine tuning. So what I'll share right now is maybe like the first step of building out an agentic system. So let me just share screen right now. And you should see my neon. Yeah, I think so. So in this example, I've created a SecOps agent, but it's really a very simple reflex agent. And why did I want to start here? Because I think when we talk about agentic systems, what's demoable, what's eye-catching is these very autonomous systems that are monitoring an environment, that are picking up on certain indicators. From there, they're building out their own workflows. Maybe they're collaborative, where they have a bunch of different MCP servers connected, or perhaps they're multi-agent. They have specialized agents that they can kick off, or specialized LLMs or foundation models to perform further analysis. An example of this is, think of like a triage agent. So triage agent might be monitoring a couple indexes related to like security incidents, right? Maybe like a notable incident index. From there, it'd be analyzing it. And perhaps in the example I'll give later, it's connected to a bunch of different services, so it can figure out how to enact to solve a solution. While this is a really good demo, in terms of productionizing it, we have to think about the cost perspective. How much would this actually cost to employ? I saw in the chat that someone asked, what's the associated cost? Well, Splunk Base offers the MCP server for free. The only thing that you have to think about is the incurred cost for SVAs, or your SPL query volume. So in this example, it's a very simplified reflex agent, right? So I have this trigger, perhaps this triggers at midnight every day, and all I'm looking at is using the MCP client. I'm connecting here to my cloud service for MCP, and I'm just using the tool get knowledge objects, and I'm just looking for the type alert. So all I'm looking for is at the end of each day, if there's an alert, send it to my agent. I could also chat with the agent directly, so I can show you what that would look like. So if I chat with the agent directly, I could say, what are the alerts? And the agent builder that I'm using here is Neon. We do have some exciting news around agent builders that I'd be happy to share. But the concept here is that this is very restrictive, right? This is a very simple reflex agent. And all it's doing is it's looking at this if condition statement. And if in this output, there's a critical security alert, then what I want it to do is trigger a message. And it's just going to trigger a message to me about the AI output. So the AI is going to perform some analysis of this critical security alert. And we can see in the alert, it's giving me a couple insights. It looks like some of the emojis that the LM created aren't being displayed. But this is just an example of some of the alerts that are coming from my Splunk environment. So it gives me a total. So I could either chat with this agent or I could just let it programmatically run. And really, the more simpler an agentic system is, the easier, right? So right now it's just using one MCP server, but say I have another environment to monitor. Maybe like I'm using Cisco Meraki for devices, or maybe for network and infrastructure, I have Thousand Eyes. So maybe I add in those as well, and then it can analyze and monitor those. So this is the very basic bare bones start. Once we start moving through that agent control flow, moving more towards autonomous, you might end up somewhere here. So this is a presentation that I built last year. I get presented at a conf. And what this was is instead of using a predetermined deterministic flow like you saw in Neon, is that I created nodes in LangGraph. And LangGraph is basically the next evolution you could think of LangChain. LangChain, the terminology chain, so it's literally sequential. But in LangGraph, you're creating nodes, and nodes are kind of like vector points. So they can interact between each other. They could jump around. So there's no predetermined flow. Even though I could create a graph of a predetermined flow, and for this demo I do, the concept here is that this is almost all the way towards fully autonomous, right? So I'm showing the spectrum, the very bare bones, simple reflex agent to really a high level fully autonomous system. And this agent is basically monitoring an environment. So I'm using Splunk MCP. I'm also adding in some Cisco proprietary tools like Secure Endpoint, Firewall, and SOAR. And I'm using Splunk SOAR connection through API endpoints. So it's a mix of APIs and MCP connections. And the way that this works is that there's initial analysis, a threat assessment. And again, this is very autonomous. Would I want to add in a human in the loop element for the threat assessment? Sure. That might be a more realistic point of view. Or perhaps I want to just rely on like UBA or some other alerting dynamic thresholding within Splunk to create alerts. And then from there, just process them and triage them accordingly. So in this studio, right, I can pull up the actual graph demo. So the way it looks is that we analyze an incident. And one of the cool features of MCP is that you can run MLTK models. So now it's AI toolkit, but we used to have this service called machine learning toolkit. And from there, I'm able to source certain machine learning models, apply them to assess a threat. So maybe there's a brute force attack. Well, a good way to analyze that threat might be looking at any anomalies in terms of maybe requests from a unknown domain or IP address or something that looks out of the ordinary. So that's why we might perform anomaly detection. So if it's high, it'll go through that. It'll assess the threat. And then after it's assessed the threat, If it's a high severity, it'll go through this isolate endpoint. So it'll use Cisco secure endpoint. Then it'll update the firewall config to isolate it further, and to basically make a path around it. And then as a final precautionary measure, it'll run a playbook. If it's medium, it'll just run a SOAR playbook. And if it's low, it'll just send it for human review. So we can actually test this out and see what it would look like in a real life scenario. So let me just open up the input. I'll go to my VS Code and I'll pull in a JSON. So again, this would be pulled from the notable incidents index. So if we had this AI tool, it would be continuously monitoring it. And let me just open this. So the first thing is that we're analyzing the incident. So it determined a high severity. So it did that threat assessment. After it analyzed the incident, it should assess the threat. And this should happen after an anomaly detection. So from there, we were able to use MCP. MCP was able to pull the machine learning algorithms. There was two that were identified, baseline traffic and DF baseline traffic. So we're creating these baseline algorithms. We apply them. And then from there, we're determining if there's any anomalies. And we found a couple of fishy IP addresses. From there, we ran through the threat assessment. So now we're giving the LM this initial incident alert, the anomaly detection, and then it's performing further analysis, right? So we can see this in the graph, the sys threat. It determined the severity is high. It explains it. After that, we ran through isolate endpoint. So we're running an API job. Here's the actual job GUI or job UID to secure endpoint. And then we update the firewall rules too. So we can see role configuration updated, and it should have updated the access group. So we're removing access for those couple of fishy IPs. And then I'm also connected into SLOR. So I found a playbook called Microsoft Defender for an endpoint network isolation. So I ran this SOAR, and I can see that I ran this playbook and success true. And then again, agentic systems, one of the key components back on Cody's initial conversation is around agent architecture. And the agent control is around if it's a simple router agent or simple reflex agent all the way to fully autonomous, which this would be. But really what makes agentic systems powerful, why you would want to use it outside of maybe like a SOAR playbook or just a workflow that maybe is AI driven, is that if we add in feedback and memory mechanisms, now we can make agentics that learn through trial and error. So now they're gaining memory, now they're gaining inference, so that when they're interpreting information, they can further, they're gaining context, right? So that's really what we're doing, is we're manipulating the context in that way by allowing feedback and memory to feed into the system to further building out systems that can perform better. And really that's what we're doing when we're building out agents. Why we wouldn't want to use a SOAR in that use case, or why we wouldn't want to use some other AI-driven workflow. Not to say those aren't important either. And I think that's the distinction to understand. When would I use agents over an AI workflow? Well, if you're just looking for something that's really reactive, probably a SOAR platform or a workflow can solve that. If you're looking for something that's more proactive, and again, understanding that systems require restrictions, requirements, and guardrails, then we can move towards autonomy. And proactive is a general term. So it could be proactive by just monitoring an environment. It could be proactive by running an automation. Maybe proactive runs automations, but it still has human in the loop. So these are all decisions. Once we start to build out agentic systems, we have to really dig down and find the answers to build systems that are effective for the objectives and serve the use cases that we select. So I'll stop sharing now, and I'll hand it on to what's next.
Thank you very much, Johannes, for everything. So we've talked a lot today about what we've been able to currently do with MCP, both in these early days of it and what's coming here a little early on with GA. But I'd also like to just now take an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about what's coming down the pipe as far as some of the other AI-related experiences we have in mind. So, get my slide to go. There we are.
Welcome to the Splunk AI Toolkit Agent Builder demo. This is a
So last year, you may have heard us talk a little bit about Cisco Data Fabric from during a couple of events, and Cisco Data Fabric is a very important part to how we're now approaching the platform moving forward. So in a lot of ways, you can just think of Cisco Data Fabric as the next-gen Splunk platform that delivers the value of operational data for AI. So we're trying to create what is effectively taking all the things that you loved about Splunk as a platform so far, and then finding ways to enhance that with AI in meaningful ways that mean things to the sort of use cases and scenarios you see in your day-to-day. So as we talked about with that, Cisco Data Fabric is AI-powered wherever it makes the most sense to deliver accuracy and efficiency and help take some of the manual and repetitive tasks throughout your day-to-day life cycles and make things just that much smoother and more efficient. So for something like data management, it's always a very challenging manual task, but now we're incorporating ways for AI to be able to help you do things like build custom schemas and perform field extraction a lot easier. For something like federated search, we're looking at how you can use AI to get better insights from the data you have stored across your environment without needing to move it. And you can then correlate that data with machine data that you already have in your business data to help you prioritize what's most important. We've talked a lot about native AI experiences today with what we're doing with things like MCP server and Splunk AI Assistant. But we wanted to make the user experience that much more impactful through the power of AI, letting you do things like build your own agents or use some of these turnkey features in things like AI Canvas that we've also currently got an alpha going on for right now. And finally, a lot of the underpinnings we have here for platform AI tools that'll help you build agents and understand a lot of that machine data that you have. So it's taking the data you already have and being able to make more sense of it and then use that in a much more robust and logistical way. And all of this is sort of underpinned by the power of the machine data lake, which will provide a place for you to land all your data and cost effectively. So that's sort of a look at where we're going with Cisco Data Fabric and how MCP fits into all of that. But obviously right now we have a variety of other platform AI tools that you can take a look at. So obviously MCP, big focus on today. We've got that you can try out coming again to GA here on February 4th. We have Splunk AI Assistant, along with a couple of other specific toolkits that you can try here. I've seen a lot of people talk about AI Toolkit here in the chat today, so it seems like a lot of people are getting a lot of use out of that already and have shared a lot of interesting stories with us so far on that. So no matter where you may be with that, we have something here for everyone on the platform that you can use to enhance that experience and use AI, again, in these meaningful ways to help your day-to-day needs and use cases. So to look a little bit more about what's coming next with MCP specifically, I'm going to turn things back over to Johannes to give you a bit more of a preview of what we have coming down the pipe.
Thanks, Cody. So yeah, a couple of things that are coming next. I think a big question is, okay, this is great. And I just wanted to answer this in the chat too, because I'm seeing this come up a lot, which is, well, how do I allow the LLM to know which indexes are important, or how do I put in those restrictions on indexes? So again, like we're building out systems, and I want to keep using the term agentic systems and not AI agents or AI-driven workflows, because if they're systematic, we need to find ways to employ it. And it could be perhaps we use the LLM, and the LLM just uses its general knowledge to determine what tools would be necessary, or perhaps we use restrictions, like index restrictions, maybe by limiting roles by users. And this leads us into like the first step of what's coming next, which is admin controls. So being able to toggle on certain tools and capabilities and kind of categorize them by different users. So different users might have different access to roles, and those roles have limitations. Maybe they only have a certain amount of indexes versus an admin that has full visibility. So keep that in mind. That might be a good way to enact that restriction and permissions without having to create like a document or a knowledge artifact that explains it, or relying on the LLM to perform that general analysis to determine what indexes would be important for a user. that's another way you could restrict indexes or access. So that's coming out in the new release. On top of that, we're going to have OAuth 2.0. Right now, we're using Studio connection. But if we have OAuth, this really opens the aperture for applications around Splunk MCP server and different agent builders and other open source proprietary like AI workflow solutions. And then in addition, MCP servers, right? So these are the tools, but I also wanted to pitch that we're also building out specific or specialized foundation models and LLMs. So there's going to be a new release of a specific foundation model that's around time series. So looking at time series data, and Splunk has a lot of data. So being able to operationalize those data to fine tune and better train models is a great next step. We could go to the next slide.
All right. We have had a lot of questions come in from the Q&A side here. A lot of folks interested in learning more for everything here. So I'm just going to go down the list. And Johans, if you want to answer a few of these as I read them out to you. So is there a way to create collections to make available through MCP? As an example, to do things like limiting indexes, source types, or report data?
Do you want me to grab that? Or I know Ansham's here too, and Ansham's the actual PM for MCP servers. But if not, yeah, let me.
I can jump on that and say that at least at my environment, you can just use the MCP. You know, I have two environments of Splunk completely on-prem, and it works. It doesn't need anything other than the client to connect to the MCP server via network.
Yeah, I think the question though was around like collections and indices. So again, like if there's certain roles and roles only have permission to certain indexes, then that's one way you could do it. I think a good application is building out summary indexes for like alerts or dashboards. So perhaps if you wanted to rely on that, like dashboarding and alerting beforehand, that's another way. Also, in terms of the LLM, right, you could create restrictions. So you could, within the call of like the tool, create a restriction that says you can only access this certain amount of indexes. So you could try to limit the interaction on both ends. The best way would probably be on the Splunk instance, limiting like what the token would have access to. And you could do that by roles. You could do that by capabilities. That goes deeper into like the ways that you can manage indices and data within Splunk. And I know that there's ways to like build out collections. I can't speak to like all the details there, but just keep in mind that within the Splunk environment, that's probably the best way to do it.
All right, thank you for the information on that. We've got a couple of other good questions. Let me find. So this is one that's answered here in the FAQ, but for Splunk Cloud customers, does using the MCP server or the Agentic AI have an additional cost, more ingestion being done, more storage needed, et cetera?
I think the answer is no there, but again, like the only incurred cost is around SVAs because it's installed on the search head MCP server as a Splunk-based app. It's very lightweight. Like I think people have asked, well, like what's the associated like compute or resources that are used up? It not really a lot, right? Because it's effectively a wrapper, and it's really just like a MCP server is the MCP client connecting to the server, and that's what's hosted in the Splunk-based app. So we're really hosting a lot of it, and if you're relying on an external LLM, then the LLM is going to be more resource intensive than the simple MCP server.
All right, next question here for you. When using MCP to interact with Splunk, what safeguards or guardrails are in place to prevent users from intentionally or accidentally deleting data, for example, via a destructive search command or administrative actions?
Yeah, so I think to begin, we've been pretty safe by first really only building read. So there aren't many destructive, like you can run a Splunk query, but you can't create or delete. So that's the first thing we did. But again, with admin controls, having the ability to restrict certain roles or certain users, and effectively you're restricting the token, then you'd be able to further enact that. So once we start developing tools like creating tools where users can create their own tools or delete certain things, then having those admin controls is a must-have, not a nice-to-have.
All right, a couple of other questions coming in here. For on-prem Splunk Enterprise installs, is there something that needs to be enabled on the server side to use MCP?
So I think Ansha might be better to answer this in the chat too, if you can get to this. But I believe right now we have Splunk Cloud Connect. So that's the current application of using MCP server on-prem. I know that there's going to be an update. I don't know the specifics there of what would be available in GA or if it's in preview for on-prem. But right now, the current infrastructure is a Cloud Connect connection. And that's available like in air-gapped environments too. Yeah, I would say talk to your account team for further information. Every account is slightly different. And yeah.
All right, another question. Always a popular one. Is this available for FedRAMP Splunk Cloud?
Yeah, and Ansham put in the chat that they can just download the app for on-prem, so that's the newest update there. And then in terms of FedRAMP, again, like I guess it would still apply in FedRAMP. I know FedRAMP has like further restrictions, and usually like tools, capabilities, just as an umbrella term, come later for FedRAMP than they do for cloud and then on-prem. So keep that in mind. But again, if you can just download the app, so if there's any access to the internet to at least download it or install it and then put it into like a black box machine afterwards, then that's the way that you could do it. But again, I think talking to your account team is important. And the only tools that might be limited would be we have Assistant for SPL tools enabled in MCP, disabled, but all the core capabilities of the MCP would still be there. And just a quick question, can everyone see the FAQ slide or not? Cody, can you see that or no?
It's showing up okay for me right now. Looks like...
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we can just keep these on as we keep going.
Sure. A few more questions before we start wrapping things up here. Let me see. It looks like Ansham's answering that one. Do you see value in building a potential feature to audit whether API calls are made from agent through MCP versus other types of clients?
Yeah, I think there's definitely value. So again, as MCP and agents bring in this new attack surface and also just infrastructure surface, there's a need to observe it. There's a need to secure it. One of the cool things, and it's on the next slide, is that we have this, it might be in this slide actually. Yeah, there's an observability for AI solution. So within Splunk Cloud, we're developing this AI for observability. But really just Splunk at its core, you could build out SPLs and a dashboard to manage and to observe. But it is important, especially if you're running like a large IT or large dev environment. Understanding which users are using all your tokens is probably an important way to look at something, but also analyzing agent interactions, right? When does an agent perform something? What was the context? Rogue agents, either from a cybersecurity standpoint or internal rogue agents, are also things to think about. So yeah, that's a good question. Definitely important to look at. There's some solutions that we offer in Splunk. And if you use like third party or open party like Linksmith or LangGraph, they have like tracing. So there's other solutions out there if you're looking for some open source.
All right. As we're getting down to the end of our time here, I've got one more question I'll put out here before we do some final resources. Oops, sorry. Is MCP server included with Splunk AI Toolkit? How do they work together? And does Splunk create other AI tools or apps besides the ones we've mentioned? So to the latter part of the question, yes, we have a variety of other AI-related tools and features that we talked about a little earlier there as well. But Johans, if you want to talk a little bit more about the first part of that question.
Yeah, so first part of the question, they're different. So again, MCP server are tools for an LLM. The AI Toolkit is a platform to develop models and workflows. And on the FAQ slide, I did a good job of explaining it. So we have assistive AI. So think about SAIA for SPL generation. We have custom AI. So AI Toolkit is a good example for that. And then we have specialized AI that we're building. So specialized agents, foundation models like the time series model. So I think that answers both questions, actually, unless you wanted to add more there, Cody.
I think you covered it good there with what we have there on the slide as far as some of the other AI solutions we offer. I know we have some more questions in the chat here. I apologize we don't have time to get to everything here, but please know that we'll get all of these afterwards, and we'll reach back out to anyone that had a question here to try to answer and connect with you afterwards to talk a little bit more. But as we're wrapping things up today, just want to also offer you a quick update on some resources here. Johans has worked on a lot of the various resources you see here on the screen. You'll get all the links to these in a follow-up email from our team, which will give you access to everything like the MCP server blog, the various setup videos, some of these various Lantern articles, which again, Johans has put a lot of time and effort into to help better explain some of the ins and outs of MCP. And then obviously you'll be able to check out the app on Splunk Base here very soon as well. So again, as we're wrapping things up here, again, we appreciate the questions that came in today, hearing the feedback that we got from you. We encourage you to continue that conversation over at community.splunk.com. Always great to hear from our customers about what they're liking about products, things maybe that they're not enjoying as much or want to see in the future. A lot of the things that we've done as far as how we're developing AI across all of our various feature sets here, we've gotten feedback from all of you over in the ideas section to let us know what you like seeing, what you'd like to see more of. So we would encourage that conversation to continue. So please just feel free to let us know your thoughts on MCP, any of the other AI things we've talked about today, or just things you'd like to see in the future from us. And one final mention here. So if you liked what we talked about today, we have an upcoming tech talk on native AI intelligence and looking at Splunk's hosted Gen AI foundation models for security and time series coming up at the end of February. And you'll be able to register for that, I believe, relatively soon if the registration is not already open for it. And we also, in the middle of February, have an office hours coming up, which will be a comprehensive guide on SPL2 and navigating some of the new features and optimizing workflows available with SPL2. So again, if you're interested in either one of those topics, please make sure to register for those. And again, we want to just thank everyone for your time this afternoon. Hope you were able to get some insightful and useful information, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.